are you?
Pretty good. I'm hanging in there.
Pretty good. All right, girl.
Hanging on by
the
a
episode.
thread. I think that's the thing to say. You know, I'm sorry, segue. Immediate segue. I saw, you see random people on the street. And you're like, hey, good morning, how you doing? And you kind of just like, good, how are you? They're like, good. I said to someone like, hey, how you doing? She was like, I'm late.
A random person on the street?
That's an amazing answer.
I'm
Thank you for being honest.
She's like, stop fucking talking to me.
Yeah. Talking.
Wait, I saw a really good meme this morning that was like, who are all you people that are not on medication, just raw dogging the fall of mankind? Did you see that
raw
meme?
dogging is so funny.
Raw dogging the fall of mankind. Is that not the funniest phrase you've ever heard?
I was talking about I got an IUD because I wanted to get off birth control.
Yeah.
And
isn't IUD just a form of birth control?
It is. Oh, right. I didn't want to take a pill every day.
Yeah.
So, but the switch has made me very depressed. And so I said to Emmalee, I was like, how ironic would it be if I got off birth control, got an IUD because I didn't want to take a pill every day, and then I went on antidepressants.
Because you have to take a pill.
Then I would take a pill.
The fact that you're not on antidepressants is amazing to me, as I will be on this until the day that I die.
I'm raw dogging it.
And upcoming episodes of how Emmalee does ketamine. Okay.
Truly.
We're actually going to do. But for now, let's talk about relationship phases.
I love this. Dating. I love this topic. Because I think we don't,
Sometimes the advice that is given out, they lose the context of sometimes the advice you have for somebody who's been married 20 years is separate than someone who's been dating for 3 weeks, right? The context really matters. So we want to talk a little bit today about relationship stages and how things sort of switch throughout that.
And I think with the fact that we're going to normalize a lot of this is, I would hope, really helpful for people.
Yes.
Because there's so many transitions in relationships that we're just not prepared for in the ways I think we could be prepared for. So we're going to prepare you for them today.
Let's prepare.
We got so many questions. I think because it's not normalized enough.
Okay. So
we're going to go through the phases of relationships as they happen. Maybe.
So let's talk a little bit about dating.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that come up when someone's dating that you really feel like we're dealing with?
So I think in dating, going from just lightly, casually dating to it turning into a relationship, right? And when do you have that conversation about is this getting more serious? Are you dating other people? Am I going to get off the apps? I think that is a huge transition, and also it's possible that one person might be ready before the other to have the conversation or to even be in that relationship, and how do you talk about it? What does that look like?
I think that it's funny because we talk about a fear of intimacy looks different within all these stages. So I think a lot about dating and fear of being seen by someone, the fear of being accepted or rejected by someone, the fear of being chosen or not by someone, right? And I think that these come out through all the different stages, but they look different in dating, right? So when you're dating, one of the questions we get all the time is when do I bring this into the relationship? If I struggle with body image, I don't want to bring that up in the first date, but it's something that feels important to talk about, or my past history of an eating disorder. And so what date do I bring it up on? And we're all just kind of trying to figure out how do I even put one foot in front of the other, I feel with dating.
Yeah. And I think something that of course comes up a lot, if you really like someone, you're going to have anxiety about the relationship in a lot of ways, because at early stages of dating, there is no security there. And I think too often we blame ourselves, I'm just an anxious person, and I'm so worried about this. But no, there really isn't. If you haven't talked about, the boundaries around your relationship, then you're going to feel anxious, right? That anxiety is going to come up of there is no security in this. How do I fully trust that this is going to go somewhere or I'm not going to be hurt? It's understandable, especially when you have had past experiences where you have been ghosted.
Yeah. So we have to do we're going to choose 2 questions from each. We each get to choose 1 question.
Oh,
because we have so many listener questions for this episode. So you can go first, Jen.
Okay. When do you ask what we are? Okay. So I wish I could give you, it is at the 3-month mark. But I think when you start to feel that anxiety in the relationship, I think it's important for you to ask yourself, like, clearly that's important to you, right? Like, clearly this person's important to you. You have feelings for them. And I think it's completely okay for you to say, where is this going? Do you have the same feelings for me? And so I think, you can start checking those anxiety feelings that come up. And I know that that's hard, because we're all trying to be like the cool girl early on, like, oh, I don't care, like, do whatever you want. But no, it's okay to care, right? Like, what are we dating for if you're not going to like actually like this person and see if it goes somewhere?
Yeah.
So I think it's completely okay to be honest about your intentions, and to say, hey, like, I really like you. I would like for this to go somewhere. And I want to see if you're on the same page. Like, what does that look like for us? I think so often we're like worried about being needy that we just discount our needs altogether at the beginning of dating. You're almost setting up the relationship for that if you're completely discounting your needs. So I think it's okay to say, this is where I'm at. I want to see where you're at and go from there. Is that scary? Absolutely. There is the possibility of them saying, I don't want to be in a relationship. I don't see this going any further. But my thought is, like, better find out now.
Yeah.
Before you continue to get yourself into it with the larger possibility of being hurt.
And I think that there's a different conversation about, like, when you ask what we are. Like, one of the things you're allowed to ask, especially if you're having penetrative sex, is, are you sleeping with anyone else?
Yes.
You are allowed to also have, like, safety and security and know if your partner's sleeping with someone and should you guys be getting tested. Like, for me, like, I think about that as, like, okay, what parts of myself am I giving to this person? What do I want in exchange for that? For me, that's open, like, communication and transparency. So I think you have to think that in terms of that as well. So it's not about, like, when do you ask what we are, but, like, at what point do you feel that you need to know what you are? What is my anxiety versus, like, what is real? Because, like, the first date, it's like, so, are we getting married here?
So, what are we doing here?
Right? Okay, I'm picking my question.
Okay.
How to decipher between red flags versus own insecurities when getting serious with someone? I think this is a very, very good question, because we sit here and talk about, like, red flags. Okay, like, if I feel like my my partner doesn't give me their phone unlocked. Well, if I was in a relationship before this where there was a lot of cheating, then I might think that's really weird. But even in my house, I don't know my partner, like, I don't get into my husband's phone mainly because, like, I don't know how to use it. It's like a, freaking, it's
right. Oh, can we talk about the fact that, like, last night, Emily had to Skype.
Because he doesn't have FaceTime. Because he hates Apple products, because he's an engineer, and engineers hate Apple products, right? So, like, in my relationship,
who knew Skype was still a thing?
Yeah, we are the only people keeping them in business.
Right.
So because I don't have a history of infidelity and cheating in my life, it's not something I'm, like, highly, highly aware of, right? But if I was in a relationship before where there was a lot of cheating or things like that, would probably be something that's really scary for me. So I do think you have to say, like, okay, what's my own history with this versus, like, what do I believe is, like, weird, Yes. Now, if I ask my husband to throw me his phone really quick because I can't find mine and I want to call mine in the house, and he had a huge reaction, flipped out, I would maybe feel a certain type of way.
Like, why did you have
I might have, like, something,
that?
right? So that's what I mean about, like, deciphering between red flags and our own insecurities. You have to sort of check in, like, one, am I aware of what my insecurities are? And
you gotta know yourself.
I guess you gotta know yourself to grow yourself, right? So that's one of the things that I would say with dating. Okay, let's talk about the honeymoon phase, right? Okay. So the honeymoon phase, a lot of times is like, okay, now we've been dating for, like, 3 months. We were both in the same terms.
It's amazing. We don't fart in front of each other.
Okay, well, that never happened with me because I'm just always farting. That was never part of my relationship, I don't think.
Honeymoon phase ended real early. Immediately.
So, like, you're in this honeymoon phase. You've been together for 3 months. You decide that you're going to be exclusive. You are very excited about it. Everything's great. You're still going on dates.
You're like giggling constantly.
Yeah, you're still showering before you see each other.
Yeah,
like things are hot.
Yeah,
sex
things
is
are
great.
Hot.
Right, yes. Okay.
Yeah, you're having sex constantly. Maybe twice a day.
Yes. Somebody said, can you talk about the honeymoon phase ending? I feel sad about it.
Okay, first, let us validate those emotions because it is sad.
Yeah. But I also have to say at another point, I hate to do a but and, I'm going to do an and.
Right, good.
And I'll have to say is, I do think that we go in phases of our relationships like the moon, and we fall in and out of love and in and out, like, right? Like when my husband first left his job, I feel like we were very much entered into a honeymoon phase again.
Oof.
So I do think that it's a thing that you fall sort of in and out and neutral towards your partner throughout time. And if you freak out about it every time, like, that's, but it's also because what we're talking about is like before there is like a legal commitment.
Exactly.
And without legal commitment, I think
it's scary.
Or at least like conscious
scarier.
commitment, it's much harder to like relax that nervous system and like be present and just like see it for what it is. Where now I'm like,
it'll get back there.
We've been there, we'll do it again.
Because that's the thing is that I think, the first time it happens, you're like, you attach so much more meaning to it about like, what does this mean? Like, does this mean they don't like me, right? That it brings up, I think, all of those insecurities. When you're in when you're in a relationship for a long time, you realize that, like, that's just part of the ebb and flow of your relationship. Yeah. And so you don't attach as much meaning to it. You're just like, okay, we'll get back there. So, yes, it is. It can be sad. It can bring up insecurities. But know that that is a natural part of your relationship. And there's also something so beautiful about knowing each other's flaws and beautiful and terrifying, right? Like knowing each other's flaws and learning how to work with them in a different way.
Well, I think we talked about this also in our episode with Dr. Solomon, that like you can fall in love with new parts. Like I've been with my partner for 12 years and there was new parts of him I fall in love with all the time.
Because also you both are growing, right?
Yes.
Like ideally you're growing throughout time and that there's ways to continue to get to know each other. Mm-hmm. But I think along with like the dating phase, because it's such kind of it can feel more unstable. Like this is more fragile, that it can feel almost like a threat to the relationship when it really might not be. Yeah. But
at this thing, okay, we were recording an episode this morning and I said something and you're like, I didn't know that about you, right?
Yes.
Like, I mean, how much time do we spend together talking
and
stuff? So like, I do think there's something to discovering new parts of yourself, discovering new parts of your partner, that like, even if the honeymoon phase ends in the beginning, like you can actually have that throughout your relationship.
Yes. So the other question that we got was how to not feel like you've lost feelings when the honeymoon phase ends?
Well, I think there's like, how much of an adrenaline rush are you putting on this phase, right? Like how addicted am I of how this whole process looks versus like what I'm actually feeling? So like, are you actually losing like feeling? Yeah. Like you're gonna have to go a little deeper with that one.
Well, and I think too, I know I love to talk about this, but society fucks this up a little bit, that we have this sense of like, oh, that is what love is, right? That we're like, oh, this is exciting and we're happy all the time. When you like settle into a relationship, there's a level of like security in it, of like we both can kind of be ourselves. It's not as like, if there's safety in it, it's not as anxiety provoking. It's not as exciting. There's some sort of like, there's a lull in it that, you don't really see in romantic comedies.
No.
Because that'd be very boring.
Okay.
No one would want to watch that.
So let's talk about moving in together.
Oof. Such a good one.
You know what's funny is we got this one question that I want to do first. Any advice for moving in together when you both value your alone time? Here's the cool thing. If you both openly know you value your alone time, you get to make that happen. The harder transition is when one person values their alone time and the other person doesn't. That is what becomes a little bit more of a friction.
Friction,
right? So how do we have these conversations? Part of moving in together is that you cannot prepare for everything. Everyone wants to control this. So you keep thinking, well, if we can figure out, if we can write down our exact minute-by-minute schedules, then we won't ever interfere. That shit's never going to happen. Stop it right now. What we're talking about is forgiveness, right? What we're talking about is curiosity. What we're talking about is open-mindedness and expansion. The Sternberg triangle. It's like, intimacy, passion, and commitment, that's like their relationship triangle,
Yeah.
right? Okay, am I taking all these things? What does this look like together? So I think that's like an interesting part that I think a lot of these questions are about how do we prevent all this. That's not real.
Right. I think it's so moving in together is so romanticized too that sometimes our expectations for it can lead us to feel disappointed. You know, because you're like, we're moving in together, like we can spend all this time together. I think one of the tough things is that we feel like, oh, because we're spending all this time together, like that's our date. You don't need to go on dates because like we have time together. But like, no.
Yeah.
You have to get it. The house, you know, it's beautiful, but it's also where all of your stress lies, right? Like if you're at work, you're stressed all day, you come home and you're just like, this is where I can finally be myself and I can just unleash.
Yeah, you would
right?
hope. Yeah.
At home. But it's still so important to create that time for your relationship where you are going on dates and so you're creating a new, at every stage, let's just preface this, you're creating a new type of relationship. You're like learning things about each other, you're doing new things. And so moving in together is another stage in which you have to say, okay, now we actually, instead of just like being together, we have to actually make conscious time together outside of the home.
Mm-hmm. You get to pick the next question.
Oh, no. Oh my God, there's so many.
I said we can each choose one for fun, my love. You want me to choose one?
Okay. This will lead us into the next question.
Okay.
So I'll give us this. What do you think is a harder transition, moving in together or getting married?
Moving in together. What do you think?
Together.
Wait, unless you get married first before you move in together. Wait, what?
No, I would still say moving in together. I mean, I don't know because
probably because if you're getting married and you haven't lived together, you're then moving in together immediately.
Right.
So then that's got to be really difficult.
But I kind of felt like when me and my partner moved in together, I like kind of felt like we were married. Like
yeah, I did too.
I kind of felt like and once you get married, everyone's like, oh, how does it feel? And you're like,
the same.
Exactly the same.
Well, except for I had insurance then.
Right, I did not. So it was exactly the same for me.
So it was great for me. I got insurance.
This is actually turning into an insurance commercial.
Actually, you need insurance.
No, but it feels exactly the same. I think too, we were already prepped for, in a lot of ways, for, the
we're in this field, right? Yeah.
So I think some of the times where couples might struggle is if they have certain preconceived notions about what marriage looks like. Like, oh, when we get married, this will change or this will be different. We were already prepped that, like, once you get married, literally nothing changes.
Yeah.
But when you move in together, things change.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so, it's funny because you wanted to prep to go into the marriage.
Right, okay.
So here's a few things. Let's just go through a few tidbits of moving in together, though. You need to try. You need to actively and consciously try when you're moving in.
Not just ask your partner to try.
Not just ask your partner to try. You need to as well, right? And say to yourself, the things I'm asking of my partner, am I also doing myself?
Right, when you find yourself focusing more on the things that your partner isn't doing, I have to consciously check this for myself.
Sims.
Like all the time.
Sims.
I have to, when I'm like, oh, he's not doing this, this, and this. Like, I literally have to say to myself, okay, wait, I don't have control over that. How can I contribute in a different way? Mm-hmm. Because that is what you have control over. You don't have control over what your partner is doing or not doing. We talk a lot about that in our mental load episode.
Yeah. I don't know, there's like a part that I can get lost and feel overwhelmed with it that I would imagine maybe some people listening might also feel, which is that, like, I feel like I am trying, right? Like,
yeah.
So there's a part of you're sitting here like, okay, but like I really feel like I am. I get that. And still, like, are you communicating it? Are you trying not just internally? Are you trying externally? And if you're only trying externally, you're also trying internally.
Right.
Right? And like what's also the context of what's going on? Did we move in with each other and then also by chance we lost a family member? Did we move in together and then the fucking pandemic happened? Well, that's going to be a little bit more difficult than per usual.
Oh, yeah.
So, like, once again, like, a reminder that, like, everything matters within context.
Yes. Okay.
Marriage.
We're getting into marriage.
Marriage.
Getting married soon. I'm worried about falling into a rut with us not pursuing each other.
Yeah, it's going to happen.
I was just going to say, valid fear.
Do you have dogs? Do you have a cat? Do you going to have children? That's going to happen.
So, but I think it's important, like, I think it might be important to say this to your partner. Like, hey.
Yes.
When I'm
How will we notice?
I'm a little bit worried that when we get married, we're going to fall into a rut together. Let's talk about, like, if that happens, first of all, how are we going to notice it, just as you're saying? And if that happens, what can we consciously do to pull ourselves out of that rut? Because the fact of the matter is that will happen. Mm-hmm. It is just part of life. You're both going to be stressed at different times. You have pets, you have kids, you have other things going on. You lose family members, right? There's so many things that can infiltrate your relationship. But to be very conscious about what are we going to do to bring ourselves back together when we fall into that rut. Relationships naturally go in and out of connection and disconnection. Mm-hmm. The key there is that when you get into disconnection, you noticed it and you both know what to do to bring yourselves back into connection.
Yeah. Somebody said, how to know marriage is for you. Questions to help confirm it is really what you want. So this goes back to something we've talked about before, that we do something called sexual scripting, but you can use it with anything, which is, what is the point? If I'm saying, how do I know marriage is for you? Why is it? Like, what's the point of marriage in your belief? For some people, it's truly about, I want to be committed to someone. For some people, it's like, oh, I legally want the tax deduction and the insurance. You know, like, we're not judging in any way, whatever you define that is for you. But I think you have to understand, like, what's the behind it? Yeah. Is it just because you think it's what you should do? Is it because, like, if you didn't, your family would be really mortified?
Right, like, or you just already expect that that's the next step?
Yeah, did you ever think about that you have another option, right? Like, so I think we're seeing it, especially if you grew up in a home where there was a difficult divorce, or there was parents who probably should have been divorced and stayed together.
Happens all the time.
Right? You might think, like, why the fuck would I do this? And so you're going to have to define for yourself, like, really, what is the point of this? If you sat down with yourself and with your partner, why are we choosing to do this? I think that matters.
I think it does too. Can I ask you a question?
Mm-hmm.
Why did you get married?
Okay, so if I think about the point behind my marriage, I have cared about relationships since I was a young kid. My parents, although I've watched them, they have banter and they have conflict. My parents do have a great marriage, but they also had great individual identities. So I believe I had a really good model of marriage. Mm. And for me, marriage was not about a thing that you did next. Marriage was a conscious decision. I choose you, and then we grow together. Because I had really good models of that.
That's beautiful.
Why'd you get married? Insurance.
No. I mean, I would have loved for that to be the reason. No, I think I really believe in working on something together with someone else. And I think there's something to be said about, you know, I just think it's very meaningful to be able to grow with someone and to work. It feels like an accomplishment to consistently work on something with someone else, mm-hmm. and to be able to make it, you know, as best as you can, and knowing that there's challenges that come up. But I think there's something about the commitment and being able to work on something together that I think, you know, is kind of special.
Yeah.
You know?
Mm-hmm. I have a quick, can I pivot for one quick second?
Can.
Okay. Because
Thank you for asking.
You're so welcome. Happy to be considerate. Okay. Well, just because somebody had a really good, it wasn't categorized under these, but it's a really good question that I'd like to talk about.
For it.
Which is, someone had wrote it in and said, I always move too fast. Tips on how to slow down and enjoy the stage that we're in. Mm. And I want to talk about this because I feel like, especially when you're dating, there's this urgency to get married. And then when you're married, there's like this, if you want to, there's an urgency to have kids. And then, like, it's an urgency to, like, get the dog or do the thing. And I do believe that we put an urgency on moving to the next step. And how do we sit and really enjoy what it's at? Which is very hard. Also, if you look at the context. If I have family members that are in my ear telling me, I really want to be a grandma, I want kids. The social pressure. If I have friends that are doing it, if everyone around us is, oh, you guys have been together forever, when's the next step? Like, people have, like, no fucking filter. So I feel like it's not just you that's pushing you forward and moving. It's you're getting all of this contextual messaging. So one of the things I would do is I would try to tune that out. I would start to, one, have awareness and notice it, and then say, okay, that's why it's making me do this thing, or this is coming up, or every time I see an engagement on Instagram, it makes me like, we should be moving there, right? So like, first I want you to like have that awareness and insight, and then the action is to like talk yourself down from it of like, that's not where we are right now. And that is okay, and I like this phase. And if I don't, then that's a different conversation. But sometimes we're also fine with exactly where it's at, we just think that we're not.
I'm laughing because when me and my partner were living together, and we weren't engaged yet.
And you wanted to be engaged so bad.
Wanted to be engaged so bad.
Yeah.
It's because the social pressure is so real. It's just so real. The Instagram, it has such an effect.
And I can remember you saying this, and I think this is great. And if you have not heard our episode with Mary Chen about long-term singledom, you have to go back. I don't know what season that's in, 1 or 2 or something, but it's an amazing episode, and we love her so much. And I think it's funny because, like, one of the things she also talked about, and then I think it goes into for you, because I can remember having a conversation probably like 8 years ago with you. Mm-hmm. How long have you been married?
3 years.
Okay, so this makes sense. Okay, where like you were saying like, I want to be engaged because like I feel like people don't take me seriously.
Yeah, yeah.
Like you were like, if I'm like, you know what I mean, if I have a wedding ring on,
it felt like it meant so much more
for other people too.
Yeah.
And that was one of the things that Mary really talked about in this episode, is that if you are not married, people like treat you like a lot of
like a child.
And there's research about this too, that men that are married get promotions more than men that are unmarried.
Wow.
Because people see them as like, oh, they can make a commitment to a family, so they can make a commitment to a job.
Yeah, like I cried to my partner, and I was like, I just want to get engaged.
What do you think about that now?
Well, now I'm like, why was I in such a rush? You know, and I know we've talked about this, right? Because didn't you feel that to an extent too, of like I
felt it. Well, I wanted to get engaged because I really wanted to have a kid, because I'm a teen mom that had a child at 29.
Because you're currently a teenager right now. You're so much younger than me.
I truly feel like I'm a teen mom still.
But yeah, I just remember there was so much pressure, and and I cried to him, and we like joke about it now. He's like, remember when I was like, I just want to get engaged. I think he had the ring at that point.
Probably. He's just like, this girl.
He was like, oh God. But I look back now and I'm like, why? Why was I in such a rush? And to be honest, you're going to listen to this episode if you ask this question, and you're going to be like, okay, I get it. You're going to feel it. It's there, and you won't be able to gain, I mean, maybe you will, but like, it's so much harder to gain context for it until you are married and you're like, why was that so important to me?
Yeah.
Like, why did I care so much?
I have this really, like, now that you're saying this, I have this memory coming up that probably like 2 weeks before I got engaged, we were at a wedding. It was one of my husband's friends, and they had been dating for 1 year. Wow. And they were getting married. Mm-hmm. And somebody came up to me and was like, you guys have been together for, I mean, we at this point have been together for like, you know, forever, right? And they're like, oh, you guys have been together forever. When are you happening? And I remember getting so fucking pissed and like walking into the bathroom. And then he had a whole plan to propose to me 2 weeks later. But I was like, I felt this thing about like,
it's when people ask you.
It's something about somebody asking you that makes you feel like you have to defend it. It makes you feel embarrassed. It made me feel weird. I felt like this person who was getting married, like, loved this woman more than my husband loved me.
It triggers something.
None of it meant anything. Also, they're the worst.
Also, if it's like this, you know, you feel so out of control of something. Yeah. Like getting engaged, and
well, also because I was waiting for my husband to do it. I should have just fucking done it.
Exactly.
If I knew what I knew now, I would have fucking proposed to him and made myself happy.
Exactly. And that's the thing, is that like you don't even question, like you don't even think about that at the time.
This is compulsive heteronormativity.
Yes. Some bullshit.
Yes, it is. Okay, so I wanted to go
our answer is, if you want to get engaged, you propose.
Yeah, you do whatever you want to do, right? Okay, so I'm sorry, so I had to jump into that other thing. Now we can bump back to...
I forgive you. Okay. I was real pissed.
Thank you.
All right,
marry me.
We're jumping into kids. Listen, you might have to take these.
Okay, so why don't you choose a few and I'll answer them.
Okay. How do you know when you're ready to have kids?
You're never ready to have kids. You just make a choice. I'm not kidding. Right. There's no... I mean, like, right, so, like, the smart decision is, like, financially... career, like whatever. There's all these like smart decisions. When you like talk about like the right decision, like smart and right are often not the same things. So you don't. You make a decision with your partner. You make a decision with yourself. Let's see what happens, and that's it.
Love it.
Nikki is looking like she's about to throw up right now.
When one partner is ready to have kids before the other, they've been together for 11 years and they're 33.
I think this is really hard, especially because a lot of women feel the biological part of it. And they have doctors saying stuff to them, and they have friends that are going through IVF and infertility. So I think that this rush that women can often feel, it can feel much different than men. And so I think that's like part of the conversation is like, I'm feeling this anxiety, you're not, but like, can we have a conversation here? And like, also it's one of the times where I like encourage you to like have conversations with your doctor. You can take fertility tests, you know what I mean? Like you can see where you're at. Like, but it's true. If you have something like a PCOS or endometriosis or different things happening, like you're going to feel this, and your partner needs to be able to hear and relate to you.
When does the phase of child rearing get easier on the relationship?
Okay, so divorce rate drops after all your kids are 5 and up.
I did not know that stat.
So my guess is then.
You're almost there, Em.
But then you're
so
like
close.
But
Getting
then
to the finish line.
So like yeah, like I don't know, like if you're looking at research, like there's like that's like the research answer I can give you. But yeah, I think a lot of it depends on one, also how many children you have. What if you have children that have special needs or special concerns or disabilities. I mean, any of those things can impact it. So it's hard to give like this general idea. But probably when they're full day school and you don't have to also pay for additional childcare. And I would imagine that it makes things better.
Okay, so here's my follow-up question that's connected to this. Reconnecting now that we're moving out of the baby toddler phase, what would be tips that you would give to
prioritize
people?
yourself. It starts from the top down. If you want a solid, cohesive family, is your marriage solid and cohesive? So once you're out of that phase, what are we doing to really reconnect? Maybe it was that we were so exhausted by the time we put the kids down. Before, we used to never do our little at-home date nights. You do not need to always pay for a babysitter. Do stuff at home. Sit in the backyard. Have a glass of seltzer together.
I feel like you're so good at that. What if you don't have a backyard?
Like you? Yeah. You do have a little back patio.
But those fucking mosquitoes.
There's a lot of mosquitoes. Well, I mean,
go to the park.
You could walk to the park you.
Go to Quizzo.
Go to Quizzo, right? So now is the time. And also looking at your partner and saying, hey, I've missed you. I want this again. I want these other parts of you. Let your partner know you want them, you crave them, you miss them. That's going to make a difference. Everyone wants to be loved. And it might feel a little awkward at first, and that's okay. Let it be weird. Let it be awkward. Let this phase dive in, but so is dating.
Yes.
So get nice, feel good about yourself. Also, like, I feel like when you like have an infant, you're like, I couldn't give a shit less how I look or how I feel, anything like that. So it does. I remember someone saying to me, it takes 2 years to feel like yourself again.
Do you feel like that's true?
I think it took me 3.
Okay. That's right now, no?
Always tends to take me a little bit longer.
Right.
So for me, I do think it took like Millie turned 3, and I was like, okay, like now I feel like I can like focus on myself a little bit. So there was also a pandemic during that time.
Right, you can't. Right, it's hard to judge.
So we really couldn't get out of the house that much. Like that was a whole thing.
But I think it goes back, and this other question: how do you transition to an empty nest and like each other again? I think it goes back to what we were talking about: is that at different stages in your relationship, you have to get to know each other again, right? And
who are the parts of you that you grew into in this time we had the kids at home, and what are the parts of you I have to re-meet now?
And the fact of the matter is that, like, having the kids at home is a good, right? It's really you're able to triangulate them really well.
Don't worry, once the kids leave, you'll show that to the dog.
Right, exactly. You'll have other things.
Yeah.
But I think it that can be really terrifying once the kids leave the house to say, like, oh God, like we have to get to know each other. I have to get to know myself separate from, the kids around. And with that, I also have to get to know my partner again, and normalizing that, right? That does not mean that the relationship isn't working or that you can't make it work. It's just you're having to get to know each other again in a different way. And I think that there's so much fear around that, where it's like, oh, we're not connected anymore. Like, this is terrifying. What does this mean? Where when you feel that disconnection, it might just be a signal of, like, how do we reconnect now?
Yeah. Hey, dear Em and Jen.
Oh, we're ready for it. Yeah.
Dear Em and Jen, I've been careful with who I've wanted to ask about a deeply personal life crisis, and I figured you guys are the most trusting with your advice. Man, I hope we don't fuck this up. I'm 30 years old, and I've been in a relationship for 2.5 years and got engaged back in December. Everything has been fine fine. Until I met someone that has thrown my whole world upside down. I'm considering calling off the wedding by my gut intuitions, but I don't know if I'm being impulsive. How do we know how to trust our gut? The long story short is that my fiancé is an amazing man, and I always felt one thing was missing, but I know I can't expect him to fulfill my every need. Except the one thing missing is a really big piece to the puzzle. I don't think I've ever experienced a strong spark or deep connection. I've met a man at work. For the record, I have not cheated, and it seems I have found the thing that's been missing in my current relationship with someone else. We've always been cordial, platonic for the time I've known him, about 6 months, and it just grew to something so deep. I feel like shit about myself that I let myself get to this point, but it's something that I can't even begin to describe how it even happened. It's a deep connection I have only had with one, maybe two people in my whole life. Is my gut telling me that I shouldn't get married, or are my expectations unrealistic for my fiancé and I'm self-sabotaging? I'm absolutely terrified of settling and also potentially walking away from a great life partner. Hopefully you guys can help. Thank you so much in advance. Take a deep breath. Initial reaction.
My first reaction is that when you feel something big is missing in your relationship, it's easy for someone else to come in and it's easy to look for that in someone else. That sometimes that is when cheating happens in the relationship. I think that, so unfortunately we're not going to have the perfect answer for you. No, we're not going to tell you to do one thing or the other, but I think if you do choose to stay in your current relationship, that it's going to be important to talk to them about the thing that is missing, because it will not just go away. This feeling won't just go away by making this choice.
The hard part is it's always going to be now part of you, and you're always going to wonder, right? And so I think you have to say is one, I always ask people okay, if nothing ever changes today, does this relationship still work? So if that spark never came, if that piece of the puzzle never came back in this marriage, are you okay with that? Does this marriage still work? I'm also wondering if your partner read this, what would they think? Would it work for them too? And I'm not saying that to make you feel bad. I'm sure you're wonderful and you're clearly so loving and so considerate. And I think it's still part of this about this isn't just about you. The other part that comes up for me is, would you be calling off the engagement for this other person or for yourself?
Yeah.
That's a big difference. Because you have to say to yourself, let's pretend that this person never existed. If you had never met him, would you have still had doubts? It sort of sounds like yes. I don't know. I don't have you here, so there's times when I wish that we had a landline and we just called you on the phone.
Landline again. We could just do a cell phone. But
yeah.
I don't know why you keep saying landline, because we could just use a cell phone. I don't know what year you think it is, but continue.
Okay, great point. So the thing I would want to know is that what would ending the engagement be about for you or for the other person? And I think that matters, because if it's for yourself, because you think I'm just going to doubt this for forever and I don't think it's right, maybe that's something to consider. I also would wonder, what would it be like to just take a break on the wedding prep and try to make this work, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be it doesn't have to be, there's not only two answers here, right? What would it be okay, I'm noticing something's coming up, I need to talk to my partner about it, because I do want to get married for life and not just as a trial run. And so what if we were all right, we're just going to pause the wedding planning for a second. We tell everyone COVID or something. You can make up some fucking lie.
Yeah, use COVID again.
Yes. And then you say I want to try to do this. And there's so many different things, right? I highly recommend the 36 questions to fall in love. Or, our friend Mac has great intimacy questions and card games. There is stuff to work on that part.
Yeah.
Because there also might be parts of your fiance that you haven't met yet that do spark parts of you.
And I think that can be really scary to say. It might be important to be very honest with your partner.
Risk it all.
And risk it all and say, I feel like this one thing is really missing, and I'm wondering if we could build on that, because that scares me.
Because also there's a certain amount of truth we need here, right? And that's the thing. Terry Real says the marriages that report the highest happiness are also the marriages that say that they're willing to risk it all with honesty.
Yeah. And if you start to practice that now, if you do continue in that relationship, then you're setting up the marriage to be very honest in the future, right?
Yeah.
Because if you hold this in and decide to get married, you never talk about this, I'm sure there will be other things in your relationship that you're going to continue to hold in. It's going to build and build and build. And so it's really important in a marriage, and really scary at the same time, to say, I need to be really honest with myself, and because of that, I have to be very honest with my partner too.
I also want to, for a minute, talk about like the shame and guilt that you feel. You feel like you're this bad person. You're experiencing what a lot of people do, which is like, we make connections to people. Like, I don't think that you meant to make that happen. There's a really good book called Not Just Friends that talks about how like sometimes this just happens, a lot of times with work colleagues, and that does not say anything about you as a person. You're clearly amazing, incredible. You thought really hard about writing this in and where to take this and where to search for this. And so I think there's also a part where like, how do you let your insides match your outsides that can help you feel a little bit more aligned with your integrity?
And thank you so much for trusting us and letting us in with this, because can't imagine that was easy to write up.
So we hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you liked it, we always ask you to send it over for friends. Rate, review, subscribe, follow on Apple Podcasts. You can now rate and review on Spotify. You can watch our minisodes on YouTube. You can follow us as ShrinkChicks, or if you want to work with one of our amazing clinicians, you can check out therapygroup.com if you are located in California, Florida, New Jersey, New York, Delaware, Massachusetts. Did I get them all? And Pennsylvania, where our 2 actual locations are.
Used all of the other states. That's okay.
All the other states in Pennsylvania. We hope you liked today's episode. We love you. We can't wait to talk to you next week. And don't ever forget that to grow yourself, you got to know yourself. We'll see you soon.
See you.